Good afternoon, all. We're in the middle of January. We still have crisis with COVID, but the end is in sight with the vaccine. Welcome to the Human Results Podcast. As always, we're joined by the HR expert, not just of Shropshire, but of the UK, Mr. Alasdair Hobbs. Good afternoon, Alasdair. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Ben, and thanks for the generous introduction.
No problem. You know, you're very well respected locally and becoming that nationally as well, as I gather from your cases all over the country. Reason why we're doing this today is that we're entering a very interesting stage regarding the vaccine. And I've heard a few questions regarding rights of people, rights of employers as well. So, Alasdair, it's important everybody has the vaccine, but we do have people that are against having it.
Yeah.
What are the rules and regulations and guidance around these people being in offices? Because obviously we've got to be careful here because we don't want somebody coming in who hasn't had the vaccine and passing on the virus around to others.
Sure. Well, it's not an area which the government has had the opportunity yet to, or indeed necessarily desire to legislate on. So we've got to go on existing employment law. You have to ask yourself the question: if somebody was to refuse to vaccinate, is that going to be a failure to follow a reasonable instruction by their employer? There are examples of, for health reasons, where perhaps a vaccination is not a good thing medically. I don't know enough yet about the risks of the vaccine, but maybe pregnant women or some people with certain conditions. I mean, there's been some anecdotal evidence of the vaccine not necessarily being too kind to some people. So there will be some health warnings attached to it. If somebody can justify a refusal on that basis, that would give them a decent argument that it wasn't failure to follow a reasonable instruction. So if that were the case, an employer would have to consider whether there was some other substantive reason in which to potentially terminate that employee's employment. If it's a straight refusal because of some kind of vaccination conspiracy theory, then I have to say they wouldn't get a huge amount of sympathy with many employers, and indeed hard to imagine many employment tribunals. I think it could depend to a degree on the nature of the work. It's hard to imagine any reasonable justification for an anti-vaxxer working in a care home or, with vulnerable people, or indeed going into other people's houses. I mean, it's like this Pimlico plumber chappie that's been on the telly again recently, saying that he's requiring of staff to be vaccinated if they're going to work as plumbers for him. And I have some sympathy for that approach. If you're sending a worker into somebody else's home for any period of time, there's the potential for putting that household at risk, as well as putting your workers' health at risk. And of course, if they then go back to, spread it amongst other workers. So, I mean, it is a sensitive issue, but I have some sympathy with that. If there's no obvious justification for saying no, it could well be that an employer will be able to terminate somebody's employment for failure to follow a reasonable instruction.
And it is going to occur. We know it's going to occur.
I think it'll occur. Sure, there seems to be enough anti-vaxxers out there. My mindset is very much show me the needle, and I'm not a big fan of injections. It's been a few years since I've had one, but I'd be there as soon as my name gets called up, comes out of the hat. Being the wrong side of 50, I'm hoping one of the perks will be that it'll be sooner rather than later.
I think the key thing for me, Alasdair, is that a lot of employers have gone to a lot of expense to make their places COVID safe, haven't they?
Correct, yes, they have. If there's any evidence to support the fact that it will also reduce transmission, if by being vaccinated you actually also don't carry it and pass it on, then there's nothing better for the work environment. Never mind however many perspex screens you've whacked up and how many hand sanitizers next to every door handle you've installed, and how many bits of sticky paper and transfers are on the walls and floor, reminding people of the distances that they need to be and which side of the corridor they have to walk on. And you can do all those things, but really, to get back to normality as much as possible, then you want people to not be in work with the virus.
But of course, before anybody takes any actions, they need to take the advice, don't they? Because it is going to be a grey area.
Always very fact specific. Any tribunal dispute, Ben, is going to be fact specific. Not all will fit all. As I say, I think you can easily see that a care home operator would have a much stronger desire to ensure that everybody was vaccinated because of the vulnerable nature of the residents in the home. Similarly, if you're operating a domiciliary care business, you've got your staff members flitting through however many homes a day visiting vulnerable people. So absolutely, where you can see them being in a stronger position than somebody saying, okay, I don't want to take a vaccine, but I work as a forestry, I work in the forestry or something. I'm outdoors. I don't see anybody from one day to the next. I'm not going to get it easily because I'm not in contact. The facts may be different, but I still think that there's going to be a degree of sympathy with any employer taking a view that if they've made their position clear, notwithstanding that an employee says no, there are conflicting rights here. There are employers' rights and there are employees' rights. And the employee has a right not to be discriminated against. If you introduce a policy that says we're going to dismiss all in this situation and it falls foul of somebody's religious beliefs, if their belief system has a strong enough views that they shall not be vaccinated, well, obviously they have a degree of rights, and that's where you're going to get disputes. That's where those disputes will arise. Yeah.
I think as always, it could be a costly experience. So I think the best advice is to get into one of your retainer contracts so they get the best advice.
At least if you know that there's an employment protection insurance policy that will hopefully step into the breach and fight your corner for you, there's a lot to be said for it. Yeah. Definitely. And it'd be interesting to see how that case law might develop. Certainly we've seen a significant increase in cases in tribunals in the last quarter of last year, something like best part of 30% rise. That's only going to keep rising. And I'm fairly sure there will be some reported cases soon enough on refusal to vaccination. It'll be interesting to see. As always, as a lawyer, you hope to learn by the outcomes of other cases rather than be the case that sets the precedent. I don't want to discount employees' own rights to say no to things that are relate to their physical and mental well-being. I think it's those are rights which have to be respected, but those competing rights have to also be respected from a society at large, and that includes the employers and their clients, their customers, their service users. Those competing rights. As a matter of public policy, I think it's you would think that it would be in the best interest of the country for employers' rights and that of their service users, other staff that are potentially vulnerable, that those competing rights with individuals' rights to refuse a vaccine, for example, would be the greater public interest. It'll be interesting to see. There may well be circumstances where the individual's rights will be respected, but I'll be interested to see the facts of that specific case when it happens.
Interesting, a long way to go on that, no doubt. That was the main reason for the podcast today, of course, but I do feel we do have to touch on events. I think we've seen a major 24 hours on events with Glastonbury cancelling.
Yes, James Bond being pushed back again. No great shock there, but Daniel Craig is going to be drawing his pension by the time that film rolls out and his successor is announced. But yes, it's been, Glastonbury, no great shock, was it? I suppose. It's June, isn't it, Glastonbury?
It is, yeah. Of course, a lot of the issue with the events, Alasdair, is that the people that are going to attend aren't going to be vaccinated till September, are they?
No, that's right. I guess that the large percentage of people at Glastonbury are younger than are in the younger age groups. Yes. So I suppose that they won't be vaccinated by June.
What's your feeling about, obviously we see each other like local events, things like food festivals, beer festivals. What's your feelings on those?
Well, I know we're all desperate to see the return to some sort of normality, and those kind of gentle leisure pursuits with the family are great fun, aren't they? A lot of people like them. It's great for the local economy, great for small food producers and small businesses and indeed the events industry. If you're asking me as a matter of my own view on it, I think really until I've had the vaccine, or at least the first jab 3 weeks before, I'd probably still be anxious about wandering around, notwithstanding a mask. I think especially in a busy event, even outdoors, I think that kind of anxiety will take a while to come back. Hopefully by August, maybe the Chancellor will be doing the Eat Out to Help Out kind of schemes again. And that certainly seemed to help people overcome anxieties last summer. We then had the much expected second wave, which and then subsequently at Christmas, the next variant of the COVID virus, which seems to spread all the more easily. So I think that this lockdown, a lot of people are very jaded by it. I think a lot of people have been concerned enough to be sticking to it. Whereas back in the lockdown in November, in England anyway, I think a lot of people weren't. You see a few ridiculous stories like that wedding attended by 400 people at a school in London I just read about this morning. I mean, that is just extraordinary, and what a selfish act the organisers of that, and indeed the host, the landlord.
Yeah.
I mean, the school governors are denying all knowledge of it and are saying how appalled they are of it. But somebody who had a key legitimately for that has been involved in that, and it's just been done for financial gain. But the 400 attendees, frankly, should know better. When the likes of Rita Ora think it's okay to go and have a 30th birthday party with 30 guests attending, how many people in the country have had to cancel wedding plans, cancel parties and things to do the right thing? You get that strong feeling that somebody who thinks I can afford a 10 grand fine and I'm going to have it hell no high water because I'm not prepared to adhere to the rules, I think just utterly selfish.
I think one of the first things we'll see back are exhibitions and expos on a small scale as test events. I think that's probably the best place to start to get the business.
I hope so, Ben, and hopefully by March. Obviously, schools have to go back first. I think schools and colleges were a big catalyst, weren't they, in September, October, for the numbers going up again. That's had a big hand in it. Certainly locally, students coming back and spreading it, and students, of course, going to colleges all over the country from wherever they're living. That's a catalyst, and they'll be aware that they'll be acutely aware of the government. That's probably the case again. So they've really got to get a handle on the R rate before schools and colleges go back. And I don't see the pubs opening anytime until well after schools are back, don't you?
I think schools will be Easter. I'm honest with you, at any serious rate. I can see them having another half term off. And I think the hospitality industry will be around about the same time. Maybe during the Easter holidays, the hospitality industry will be open, encouraging families in bubbles, maybe. I can't see schools going back in 3 weeks like they're expecting, to be honest with you. I'd be very, very surprised at that. But, I mean, yes. I do think, we've been homeschooling 6 and 8 year olds and it's difficult, but I do think that we're lucky to have a 6 and 8 year old because they're learning new experiences, whereas I think I've got a 15-year-old son that lives with an ex-partner. He's just coming to exam year next year. I think that's the generation that's suffering at the moment because of exams are obviously high pressured.
Well, we've had 2 years now where school's been badly disrupted. My daughter missed her GCSEs last year. My son was supposed to be doing common entrance exams, and that was scrapped. My son just commented this morning that he's not really enjoying homeschooling at the moment, and he's doing well. He's doing well. He's coping well, really. But I just think that, like working from home here, you're sitting in front of a Zoom screen, sitting in front of video conferencing day in, day out. Your sports afternoon still in the timetable, but in fact, you can't do anything with it. He needs to interact with his friends. It's not just about the academics, is it? It's all they're missing out on the football fields, all of that social interaction and play with pals.
Let me ask you this, Alasdair, because obviously when times are good, you're heavily involved in recruiting, etc., and contracts for people. How do you think in 2 or 3 years' time it's going to sit when students do go for interviews and they say, watch your exam results, say, I am a student affected by the COVID crisis. How do you think employers then have to sit down and assess that?
I suppose it depends in the context. If you mean that somebody's saying I didn't do as well in the assessed results as I could have done in the exam, well, I think I'd have some sympathy with that. They're typically based on things like mock exams. Knowing from my own school days how much of a crammer I was in the last weeks before exams, you do go from a very zero to hero, quite easily, just by cramming in the knowledge, So I think if you're getting based and assessed on mocks that perhaps would have ordinarily have taken place at the beginning of January after Christmas, well, how many kids have got the discipline to spend their 2 weeks of their Christmas holidays beavering away on the books? Chances are they're flying into their mock exams having hardly looked at anything for 4 weeks. So, I'd like to think employers would have a degree of sympathy for that. But equally, if they've got a candidate who's got excellent results, who's gone through the same thing, you've got to base your assessment on something, haven't you? So
yeah. Interesting times to come.
As a recruiter, I don't just look for exam results. I'm looking for other aspects of somebody's makeup. I don't necessarily look for purely strong academics.
Well, I think it'll show the capability and the adaptability of people as well. If they say, well, I got these during COVID. I didn't do exams. I had to do the coursework build up or the mock exams or et cetera, et cetera. And you can say, well, okay, they're adaptable, so maybe they'll fit into your business a lot better. Okay, well, Alasdair, look, that's a great roundup. Right. I think we've covered a lot there. And this is going to be your first podcast on Amazon. You're going to be launched on Amazon later on today, just to let you know, which you were unaware.
Oh, okay. Marvellous. Does that mean I can be delivered within 24 hours free of charge?
I'll let the customers decide that. Brilliant. Alasdair, as always, thank you for the podcast. Fantastic.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.